Let's be brutally honest right now. That's a big question.
I'm looking for someone who doesn't want to go to base camp, but they want to go to the very top.
Whether it's here, India, New York.
Civilization was born at happy hour.
That's what wins. That's what stands out. That's what people are interested in. That's what I want to know. The Hospopreneurs Podcast with James Henderson.
Hello and welcome back to the Hospopreneurs Podcast. After working at Ottolenghi in London, Ben co-founded the Tommy Collins Group in 2007 with the intention of providing end-to-end catering. Now, over 16 years later, he leads the group as managing director and has contributed to countless Victorian venues, from iconic Melbourne pubs and cafes to major events. One thing that's clear is Ben's passion for hospitality. I could tell, and we do talk about this, that he has really been in the trenches, 6 deep, the printer breaks and you're out of vodka, those sorts of scenarios. With this in mind, he tries to bridge that gap between quality and commerce with innovative food experiences. I really enjoyed the interview with Ben, and I hope that you do too. Hello and welcome to the show, Ben.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on. I'm excited to open up more about your background. I know you've worked overseas, you worked here, you've now got a whole range of venues, you're going through a rebrand at the moment. I'm really excited to open up the interview on your career today. So thank you very much for joining me.
No, my pleasure. Thank you.
Ben, as you know, the first question that I like to ask on the program is a crazy hospitality story or exceptional hospitality experience. I'd love to know what you've brought to the program today.
It's a really good way to start, and I've been thinking about this over the weekend. I think for me, hospitality is really a series of so many moments where we refer to them as sliding door moment. Do I go this way or do I go that way? For me, there was a real point. Found myself in Edinburgh in late 2005, early 2006. I was managing a club called Opal Lounge, 700 people, members club, sunken lounge, dance floor. It was great, but it was quite intense. And we had a really wealthy demographic that were also really wasteful. And some young Norwegian kids would come in and they'd buy 2 bottles of champagne. They'd have the bartenders pour one down the sink and serve one. And for them, it was about stature. Yeah,
right.
And it just broke my heart. It made me so annoyed that they'd be so wasteful with beautiful champagne. Hundreds of pounds down the sink just so buy 2, serve 1. One night, just at the end of my tether of that, went out the back for a quick smoke and my housemate was out there doing the same. And I flippantly said to him, fuck this, let's move to London. He said, sure, let's do it. So a couple of weeks later, we packed up and moved down pretty spontaneously. And I thought it was a bit odd for him to be so eager to move because he was quite settled in and had been there a lot longer than I was. But we moved down and we got jobs. I started working at this members club called Home House, which was a really beautiful terrace, opulent. I thought this is going to be great. We're going to raise the bar on hospitality. And all they wanted to do when I first got there was talk about Madonna's a guest and Guy Ritchie's a guest. And I was so disillusioned again by this focus on wealth and stature that I lasted one shift. Went for a walk down Islington and stumbled across Ottolenghi, which blew me away, just the quality and the presentation. And again, late 2005, early 2006, Ottolenghi wasn't superstar he is now. I'd never seen the big salads, the presentations outside the markets of Marrakesh. It just wasn't presented like that.
Yeah.
The oversized meringues in the window. And so I went straight in. I said, please, I'll do anything. I'll be a dishie. I'll be a waiter. The GM had just started maybe a month or 2 beforehand. She saw something on my CV she liked and gave me a job as her assistant manager. And it was a really defining point for me where I was quite flat. I think most people in hospitality, either in or have been in, will remember that point where they get flat and they just think, is this for me? Is this my life? Well, that's where I was. Walking into Ottolenghi, it just changed that. It just re-sparked that fire to say, no, there is a higher standard here. It's an origin story.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that as well. And just before we started the interview, you mentioned that was at the time when the first book was going to be published there as well. So it was probably a key moment for him too.
I think so, yeah, it would have been.
Yeah, but an exciting time to be around that too. Are there any things that you've taken from that experience that you apply today?
Everything. Yotam was not in the store. You know, he had half a dozen stores of that store, maybe 3 or 4, but he would come in and he would taste daily, every second daily. He would give the staff around him something to taste. Green bean, is this too salty? Does it need a nut? And he'd listen to their opinion and then he'd go and work with the kitchen and say, oh, Ben thinks it needs more seasoning. I didn't say, hey, you don't want to piss off the chef.
You don't want to piss off a chef. I've learned that.
The way he approached food, the way he approached his staff, he was such an open book. He was so just wanting the right everything, the right food. We got to a point where the shop was getting too busy and he was worried that the standards were going to drop. So we went through so many different feasibility studies. How can we control the environment better? And, in London, the weather's horrible, so everybody rushes to get inside. And right at the front of the store was all the presentation. And it really got to the point where we had to raise these prices just to kind of slow down the foot traffic, which did work and obviously good for him and his business, but raising those prices just to eliminate so many people wanting to buy the food because he wasn't willing to sacrifice the quality by trying to find a more efficient way of getting out, which is a common conversation at the moment. Everything's rising. How can we be more efficient? How can we cut costs? How can we do things smarter? His approach to hospitality was, how do I retain my quality? How do I retain what it is I'm proud to serve? And so all these years later, whether it's 15, 16 years later, the amount of times a week I will say, how do we retain our pride? How do we retain what we're here to do? Really comes from that 1 or so year I spent in London with them.
And how do you do that? How does a business retain that quality?
It's a good question. There's a certain level of stubbornness that you need to retain the quality because you will have outside influence say, try this, try this, try this. I love the idea of just try it. Let's just try it. I love the idea of innovation and development. So it is a really tough point to say, well, let's innovate, but also let's not lose the quality. Let's not lose the focus. I was lucky enough to dine at EMP a few years ago in New York, and their tagline was make it nice. At the time, it was the best restaurant in the world, and their tagline was make it nice. And I was just blown away at the simplicity of it. Yeah, of course, just make it nice. So when you can simplify it and just take out all the fluff and take out all the white noise, I think it helps to stay focused on what we're here to achieve. Finding that balance, of course, can be a lot harder, but you surround yourself with the people who are like-minded and want the same thing, and the conversations tend to stay on track to retain the quality over, say, sacrificing for efficiency or for the wrong reason.
So I'm going to ask you the second question that I normally ask on the program, which is why you do what you do. It generally takes a more abstract perspective, but what I'm trying to do is understand what really drives you. What is it that really inspires you to do the things that you do?
I was born into a hospitality family, third generation Lebanese immigrant. We were hustlers. We fell into the F&B. We're feeders, we're hospitable. You walk into the home of most immigrants, it's coffee, it's a drink, it's eat, always they're trying to feed you. I think it's in my blood. I've tried to get out before. I've tried to, I left school and I went and studied construction management for a couple of years, and first class, the lecturer drew a piece of wood on a whiteboard and said, this is a stud. And then he drew another piece of timber on the whiteboard and said, this is a beam. And I thought, oh, this is not me. So I left and got back to hospitality, where you get to look at a guest in the eye and work hard to make that person's day better. And it's the same story whether you're in the kitchen creating a dish of food. It could be a serve of toast, but you get to think about what temperature is this butter? Are they going to be able to spread it properly, or is it going to tear up the toast? How far do I want to cook the toast? Or if you're on the coffee machine, what temperature is it going to be? If they want it volcanic, who am I to say that's not how you drink coffee? Of course. Is that hot enough? Trying to try and make it hotter for you. Onto the floor, whether it's, a drop spoon that you pick up and replace before they have to ask, or a second napkin. All those little bits when, I guess, fundamentally I'm a pleaser. So when you get to give a guest or a customer or a regular or whatever you're going to refer to them as, that little extra bit of something that they might not expect, it gives you a feeling, a rush of, maybe it's adrenaline, I'm not sure, that keeps us coming back for more. And then to balance that with the need to problem solve. Hospitality is constant problem solving. There's always something going on. When it goes on, it's always at the worst time. But that's exciting. It's fun, and trying to preempt those issues and trying to develop the people around so that they can address those problems. There's a real reward to that I think keeps me locked in and keeps me coming back for more.
It's really nice to hear someone who's had so much experience in on-premise hospitality, to hear some of these things that, when I'm out there and I see these things.
Well, you're smiling, so I can see you understand what I'm talking about.
I definitely understand and recognize a lot of those things. And it's those little things that people who haven't worked in hospitality for a long time, they don't recognize. And people who do. And those little things, but people feel them when I guess they feel seen or looked after, or it's really hard to define. And unless you've done it, it's a feeling that you have when you give that to a guest. In the delivery of those things that you actually then give to the guests, what makes it ultimately exceptional? What is it that really defines an exceptional experience for a guest?
I think that can be anything. And I think that depends on the person you're serving. It might be a smile. One of my business partners in particular, Simon, he's heavily into the floor and into service. He lives for it. And when punters would come in through COVID and say, thank you for staying open, he would grow a foot. I'm contributing. And it's such a nice feeling that you think, what more do you need than that? And that's exceptional service in that instance. And then there's the EMP, which is the silver service and And then, we went to, I remember so clearly, we went to Flower Drum when we were about 18, 19, me and half a dozen mates, well before we could afford it. One of the boys was left-handed and kept picking up his glass left-handed. One of the waiters obviously picked it up, moved his soup spoon across to the left. And when the soup course came down, he reached to the right as he ordinarily would, only to find the soup spoons on his left, and was blown away, and it made his night. He still talks about it today. I remember when I flight and they picked that I was left-handed and moved. That service to him because he was just so blown away that someone's paying that attention to him. And their action was to move the spoon so that he wouldn't have to reach for it. And I think that's a nice thing about the industry we are in. Maybe it's a little bit of a hubris, but there are so many opportunities to deliver exceptional service that the game is really about picking what that service needs to be for you versus for me versus for the next person.
Ben, I'd love to know what you're learning about or exploring at the moment. I do keep this question very broad because I like to see where the guest goes with it.
Look, it's really contradictory to my answer before about remaining a purist and keeping the vision on serving the best of everything. And that is the efficiencies of business. And it is an excruciating period because I know where I want to be. I know what we want to be serving. I know what we want to be known for, inverted commas. I know what makes us proud as a group of individuals. But the reality is we do need to look at hospitality with new goggles on, because the hospitality I grew up with, we worked on margins 30-30-10. Food, labour, operating costs, 30% left over as your net profit, happy days. Well, in our business, those are gone. And if there are other hospitals out there still doing those sort of numbers and happy days and come and teach me the formula. Yeah, labour's gone up, cost of food and bev and all things gone up, power, everything's going up. We all know that. That's not new. You can't blink without hearing that, which is a bit of a downer. But trying to find ways to retain a margin, because it is business. At the end of the day, all the love of service and the love of food and the love of hospitality doesn't mean anything if we're not sustainable. And not just sourcing from sustainable suppliers, but sustainable we will be here in years to come because we're not going broke. What we're learning at the moment is the importance and the integration of a stronger BMS, a stronger business management system that will allow us to retain what we refer to as that non-verbal communication. How can we invest in technology to say, okay, the boring bits happen, they just happen more automated. So it allows us more time to be with the guests. And by us, I mean our managers and our 2ICs and our baristas and floor staff. So what we're spending a lot of time at the moment is really honing in on that BMS that says, okay, what's the total integration? How do we create that solution where the HRIS speaks to our sales system, speaks to our accounting system, speaks to our time management? And how do we capture that information, give it back to the managers in real time so that they can see where they stand on a roster against a budget? And how do we convert the budget to a forecast and again put that information into the hands of the people that need it as quick as we possibly can so that they don't need that half day in the office for their admin day, or they don't need that full day in the office for the admin day. We've spent about 18 months on this and we've made some really key decisions to allow that to come together. And what we found was one of the key things we found, because for a long time we were hesitant to go down this path because every technology solution was another percentage of our revenue, whether it was Mr. Yum, 2-3%, whether it's Uber, 28-30%, if it's a POS system wanting another 3%. Everybody wanted a clip, everybody. And we weren't saving that percentage in labour. We weren't saving that percentage in food. We weren't saving that percentage. So it was just adding on. But what we found over the last 18 months, there's a lot of very, very good, very, very clever systems which are not costing the earth anymore. So what we've found is it's become a lot more accessible to choose our BMS without it being at the expense of those percentage margins.
Who are you finding really good to integrate with now?
The process we took was to break down as many systems in each category as we could. So we looked at our accounting software and said, is it Xero or is it MyOb or is it something we haven't heard of yet? We looked at our point of sale and said, is it Redcat or is it BPOS or is it Automate? And because we were multiple venues, not all on the same systems, we also looked at what was the price of converting all to the one. We ended up utilising our accounting software as Xero being the core, and that became our centre. And everything we bolted onto that, point of sale, HRIS, dashboards, which is a fantastic new innovation out of New Zealand, Call, Hospo IQ, each integrate into the other. and feed into that dashboard so that we can present to the managers. We've found it to be an ongoing process. We are still implementing, but so far we've had great results.
I'd love to know where you're innovating as a group. Obviously, there are many things that we can do kind of on a venue level. What are you doing collectively that then is doing something a little bit different?
We found a couple of years ago, probably, or maybe a few years ago, going into COVID, we were 8 or 9 independent businesses all working together. I had business partners on the pub side of us called Bon Vivant, had business partners on the Tommy Collins side, and then had some partners within each entity. There was a lot of voices. And one of the conversations we've had over the last couple of years is everybody still on board? Is this what we all still want? And the answer was no for a lot of people. The spark had gone out, open, close. It just got too much for a few people. And I said, I don't want to be here anymore. No problem, let's make a change. And so over that last 18 months and 24 months, we really consolidated our group into Headco, which is Tommy Collins Group, with common ownership across the group. So we dissolved that entity and we put the new brand, the old brand, the original, the OG, up at the head of the table and restructured with our accountants over at Stannard's a consolidated tax group, which meant we could just leverage off losses of other entities a little bit better and a little bit cleaner and reduce our admin and reduce our compliance a little bit without having so many independent entities, partnerships. So we've really, as I say, cleaned up that back end, and rather than running as 8 or 9 independent businesses, I think today we're 5 under the one umbrella.
I'd like to just kind of open that up for listeners a little bit more who don't know the background. How did you come to be the group that you were prior to that consolidation?
It's been a fun journey, mate. You say, why am I in hospitality? It grows on you and it does latch on. I came back from London at a time where, I was 27 years old. It really felt like I was needing to make a decision. Do I set up life in London? Ottolenghi was opening a new restaurant with Scully called Nopi, and there was sponsorship on the table, and that was exciting. But, I came home for my grandmother's funeral, actually, and saw all my mates, and I got that sense of I need to be home. It's time. So I came home and really I landed on the Thursday, and Friday I was looking for someone to hang out with. I remembered a couple of friends' phone numbers, and the first guy didn't answer, the second guy did. That was Tommy. Tommy was at work. Tommy had just committed to throwing a party for one of his regular cafe customers' children and said, listen, I've just told her we'll throw the birthday in a couple of weeks, but it's 250 people and it's another 50 adults, and do you want to do it together? Yeah, that sounds like fun. So we threw that party and it was a great success. We flew some bartenders down from Sydney that we knew to flare and blow fire and light up the bar, and we had all these hay bales everywhere. It was a Daisy Duke theme. It was a fantastic party. And the guests there, they loved it. So the next day I've told this story a few times. I'm sorry if I've told you before, but we were cleaning up the house because it was just me and him, which we didn't think to book cleaners. We just wake up the next day and think we were going to clean the house. And the friend of that client called and said, hey, I want just the same in a couple of weeks for my boy, but let's do it bigger and better. And we started getting some momentum. Same thing happened a couple of weeks later. We threw this great party. We had John Course on the decks, our light up dance floor and bartenders and heaps of food. I want the same for my daughter, but got to be bigger and better. And it was just so much fun what we were doing at the time. And being hospitality, we didn't have HR to go and wrangle up extra casual staff. So just ring our mates, hey, do you want to come and work at the bar on Saturday night? We're at this home or we're at that home. And the guys working for us were equally having fun because we could pay them well, and we sort of looked up the website, what is minimum wage, and add $5 an hour, and that should make us safe. So everybody was earning a couple of extra bucks on us. We're all mates, so we're all having fun with it. And it just sort of organically grew to a point where we needed a kitchen. And at that stage, we weren't doing our own food. We were outsourcing to a caterer, but that caterer cracked the shits and said, well, they should be the event manager as well. So my brother's a chef, good chef. He was back in Melbourne, and I said, well, can you cook for us? So most of the time he was cooking for us, and we needed a kitchen because we were cooking out of the local butcher, Felice down in Elwood, if anyone needs a hookup.
A little plug for Felice.
A little plug for Felice. It all started with Felice. We needed a kitchen, and this site in Brighton came up that I had my eye on for years, and Tommy drove past and said, that little milk bar you're always banging on about, they're nailing a Felice sign up. I said, we'll go in and tell them we'll take it. So he did. He jumped out of the car and said to the tradie, and just so happened the tradie banging up the Felice sign was the brother of the landlord. So he gave us the number. I rang the guy, Nick, and said, yeah, we'll take it. So I haven't told you how much I want for it yet. So it doesn't matter. We'll take it. So we don't know how to negotiate a lease, don't know. And he was a really good guy. And I thanked him years later at a polo event. He could have said anything. We had no idea. I said, yeah, but we didn't have a business plan. We didn't set out to achieve something. We were just having fun. And this site had to be ours. We needed this site. But he looked after us. He didn't take the piss. He said, well, this is how much I want. I think it was $1,000 a week. I said, done, we'll take it. And we built a little cafe, borrowed some money off mum. And that was the start of really legitimising the fact that we've got a business. And this is working. We opened the door and our first couple of customers they become lifelong friends. We still see them. They were there 2-3 times a day. They told their friends. The schools were there every day. All the parents from the school would come down. And it just became this incredible community hub. And the staff we'd meet and the customers we'd meet, they're all still in our lives now. Some of the business partners I mentioned before all started there. And that was Little Ox. So from there, we just really kept saying yes, occasionally no to different opportunities, but we'd keep our eyes up and people were liking what we were doing. So they would say, well, do you want to do one here? Do you want to do one there?
What did you do along the way to carry those customers over to the work you were doing? At this time, what year are we talking here?
This was 08. We signed that lease.
Right. So they're sort of early Facebook days, right?
Yeah.
There weren't really the groups, the pages, maybe an email database. How were you actually managing?
Not just good old-fashioned hospitality.
Yeah.
We had a coffee machine. Tommy, who I mentioned, Captain Affable, just a lovely bloke. The other business partner, Lukey, could chew the leg off a chair. And, a lot of people in the immediate area wanted somewhere to be and wanted somebody to look them in the eye and make their coffee and strike up a relationship. And we just became part of the community. I don't know another way to put it. We just fit. Those customers ended up booking us for their catering and events. Once at their house, they say, we'll come and do our work thing. Once we're at their work, we meet the business partner who takes it, they'll come and do my birthday. Once in the birthday, come to our cafe. So we just created this little ecosystem around the area and it became a really strong bond with a lot of people who supported us for a long, long time. And still now. In Hampton Street, it's a lot of the same faces. The kids are grown up. It's been 15 years now. Starting to employ some of those kids who we watched in strollers. So it's a really incredible period.
Thanks for entertaining me with the tangent. I appreciate that. I'd love to hear more about how things evolved from Little Ox.
So from Little Ox, same sort of process into Hawk and Hunter. Tommy drove past the shop and said, we've got to do a cafe here. I said, sure, we'll do a cafe. So we did. One of the guys worked for us, said, there's a great opportunity out in Notting Hill. We went and had a look and thought, well, that's cool. It's out in the burbs. There's nothing here. There's no quality. There's Bain Marie's and truck stops, but nothing. So yeah, we'll do that. And we did that and that went really well. And at the same time, we tried to do a big gig where Greenfields is now in Albert Park. And I had a mate wanted to move from Sydney or Perth, I think, to be part of that project. Another one from Dubai wanted to come. So those guys migrated to Melbourne and that project fell through at the 11th hour. So they were sort of sitting there, these two guys, Nick and Rom, and said, well, we're still here. We're still ready to go. Why don't we buy a pub? I said, sure, we'll buy a pub. So I started Bon Vivant with those two and Tommy Collins stayed with the cafes. So Tommy Collins, Hawk and Hunter, Little Ox, Little Collins, and then started Bon Vivant with the other two, which was later became Montague, Cricketers, Firehouse, Villager and Post Office Club Hotel, which under that partnership was High Road Cantina, which is a South American joint in St Kilda. But really that was the beginning of the end of that relationship as we sort of differed in what we wanted from hospitality. So we absorbed that into Tommy Collins, relaunched last October as Post Office Club Hotel. And on little more than a handshake, Nick took Firehouse out in Ringwood and Tommy Collins retained a Villager up at Mount Buller and Post Office Club Hotel.
Do you have any advice for operators out there who are operating in the way that people do in hospitality? It is very much handshake oriented. Do you have anything for people to learn from your lessons?
I'm sure I do, but my advice is to make sure it works for you. If you're going to work your business on handshakes, then make sure you're working with people that will honour a handshake. And that's probably going to be the hardest thing you'll ever have to do because everybody's happy on the way in. But when it doesn't work and there's no exit strategy and somebody wants out, it's only the right character that's going to sit down with you, look you in the eye and say, hey, this is not working. And I've been really lucky that I've had that conversation half a dozen times. This is not working. No problem. What do you want to do? I'm going to go over there now. Okay, shall we do it like this? Yeah, that seems fair and reasonable. Let's do it like that. I've been burnt once. It happens.
The question on innovation usually triggers another question about creativity. So I'm really interested in understanding how you come up with new ideas, how you then entertain them, and then how you execute them.
We try and keep that process as simple as possible. So we start with a couple of really key topics for us. Nostalgia and familiarity are really important for us. When we're talking about food, service, it's got to be familiar. We talk about community. It's got to be engaging the people around us. They've got to want what we're offering. And if what we want to offer is probably not what the market wants, then don't offer it. There's no point saying, hey, take this if they don't want it. And then we look to sustainability. We try and keep those three topics relevant when we're discussing what's coming next. You could come and say, hey, let's do this new canapé. And I say, okay, well, what's the nostalgia? What does this remind me of? Why do I eat this piece of food and go, oh, does it take me somewhere? Does it remind me of something? Does it give me a warm, fuzzy feeling? And if it does, why? We don't always have to answer the question with a specific answer, but we always have to ask the question, why? What is it to us that this item, is it in a breakfast menu, a restaurant, doesn't matter. The nostalgia of the community and the sustainability of those items are our safety blankets to creativity, because creativity can go off on any number of 100 tangents, and probably and mostly they're fantastic. There's nothing better than having a brainstorm session and suddenly you're hanging chandeliers from somewhere that it shouldn't be hung from, and you've got chairs on the roof, and okay, they're all great ideas. Not what we stand for though, so we'll just pop those to the side. Now, what do we love? What do we stand for? What do we want to put our name to? And it allows us to really open the floor to our team, to the greater team. So you tell us, what are we going to do? This is not just me telling you, hey, do this promotion now. It's, what do you want to do? Oh, I really love this. Okay, well, how does that speak to the sustainability of our business? The sourcing of produce, but also, is it going to reach its margins? Can that be an item that stays on our menu for a long, long time and feeds back into the operation? Is there a touch of nostalgia or familiarity? Is it a play on something you've seen or done? And is the community going to get behind it and actually want it at this time just because it was great years ago? Maybe it's not great now. Maybe we need to hold that idea for a bit longer and wait for that trend to come full circle when it might be appreciated a little bit more down the track. So really we try and keep, a bit like the EMP, make it nice. We try and keep the criteria consistent, quantifiable. It's either a yes or a no. Is it nostalgic? No. Is it sustainable? Yep. Is it community driven? Yep. Okay, that might make it onto the page.
You mentioned some things that you want to be known for. Are these those same things, or is that something else?
When we started out, I was 08, 09. Every time you pick up the Epicure, it was ex-Ecocina. Ex-Ecocina did this, ex-Ecocina did that. Now you pick up a publication, it's ex-Michelin star or whatever. It always felt like if we were that ex-Tommy Collins, that would be success for us. That doesn't speak to taking credit for somebody else's work. It speaks credit for engaging the right people and then giving them an opportunity to really shine and find their way. When we first sat down, you were talking about I've been in the trenches of hospitality, and the trenches of hospitality are so important because they build bonds that I don't know of building a bond like that in another industry.
We had a chat before the interview about the trenches.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe in banking there is not
the same. I don't think so.
You're in the trenches, but in hospitality you are. Maybe it's 5 deep and you run out of ice or no more martini glasses.
7 orders at once. And
that's right. And what we always loved about the early days was the people that came and worked with us wanted to be on that journey. They wanted to be in the trenches. Back in Edinburgh, what I loved so much about that, I went to the GM of the club I was running and said, hey, can we move some key people to a 4-day week? He said, why do you want to do that? Why I wanted to do it so we could party for 3 days. But what I said to him was, well, we can control the busiest days of Wednesday to Saturday so we can have our All-Stars on open till close for 4 days. We work our 15, 16 hours and then we got time to rest. It's that time in the trenches that you build the bond, and the bond wants those people around you to succeed. So opening the Little Ox and into Hawk and Hunter, we really wanted to, when you say what I want to be known for, build those relationships where guys and girls people go on to create their own thing. And maybe at some point they go, well, like I do with Ottolenghi, my journey started there. That would be success for us.
Ben, I'd love to know what adjacent industries, brands, businesses you look to for the growth and success of your business.
We look at the extension of hospitality, anything with a tie back. So right now we're sitting at ECLA, Private Members Club in Hawthorn, and it has taken that curated office space environment, merged it with a private members club and said, hey, we're going to hang our hat on the hospitality, the customization of your day. You want to sit in a bar and work from a bar? You got it. You want 9 screens configured so you can present to your nearest and dearest? There it is. You want to book a podcast studio? What they've done is really taken all the components outside of accommodation of hospitality and brought it together. Now, I look at this very much as a new concept. It's not a WeWork. It's not a hot desk. It's not just syndicated leasing. It's all these components. When we look at other industries, we do bring it back to hospitality. What is the morning, noon and night? For us, that leads to hotels. That's like the pinnacle of hospitality for us because you engage somebody for 24 hours at least. and you give them everything, or you have to create a solution for everything they may need in that period. If I look at industries, I think it still dials back to the hospitality, which industries best utilise hospitality. I think it extends quite far.
Any specific products or brands that you look to that are doing things that you're like, oh, I really like the way that they do this specific thing?
Oh, I can't think of a specific thing off the top of my head. I think innovators are really important in anything we do. People that think outside the box and simplify something down to the core. And so there you go. And whenever you have that moment, oh, of course, it's so obvious.
Ben, what's your number one industry resource? And has that changed over time? What have you looked to learn about the industry other than learning by doing? And a lot of people do. And hospitality is very much an industry where you do learn by actually doing it. What resources out there have you learned from? Even people. This can kind of blur into a bit of an answer on mentorship. However you'd like to take the answer. Are there websites, books? What sort of things have you looked to learn?
I think it's a combination of what you say there. I mean, the people are so important. Mentors, leaders of all industries. You don't have to look too far for podcasts of the nature where you pick something up. Your podcast, the gentleman from Avolo, just listening to that. I know it's not a separate industry, but it has an influence. It might be one word, it might be one line. The lady you interviewed from Urban List talked about possibilities rather than opportunities. Now, I listened to the podcast and it was a great interview, but that little snapshot right there was like, yep, I'm going to borrow that and I'm just going to stew on that and think about that. So I think in answer to your question, being open-minded to individuals, to mentors, and not mentor in a traditional sense, I'll come to you, we'll sit down, we'll talk about my problems and you'll guide me. But mentors in people that can offer advice or a different perspective from my own, I think it might even come out of a book, not just a podcast. I recently got given The Prince, Niccolo Machiavelli. And again, 500-600 years old, principles are still there for control and manipulation, rightly or wrongly. I think the open-mindedness to mentoring and to people and perspectives is probably the single most important thing.
Thank you very much. And I'm glad to hear you listen to a couple of episodes too as well, Ben. Thank you for sharing that. This is a very short question, but it's actually a larger one that I might need to elaborate on. The question is, what's your biggest challenge right now? What are you dealing with currently that is an obstacle that you're trying to overcome?
Look, the single biggest hurdle is lack of profitability in hospitality. Plain and simple. We've touched on it on a couple of different questions, maintaining the pride and the passion of what we want to do, but understanding we do need to find efficiencies and we need to find new ways. Recreating something like service is near on impossible. It's all been done. And acknowledging that it's all been done, but now we have to do it anyway, is a real hurdle because we engage professionals and we've recruited really well this last 6 months. Not to say we haven't previously, but we all know the pains and the hurdles of the staff shortage for that 2-3 years there. Being able to now recruit some really strong candidates who have had time to sit back and think, what do I want and where do I want to be? And we've met them just at the right time that, yes, I do want to be with an emerging business rather than established, which is something we position to them, has allowed us to get a new insight and a new perspective on what their new hospitality is. And for us, what it looks like is hospitality coming full circle. You go back 20 years and 3 services out of a venue was pretty normal. Then we all decided, well, no, you can't be everything to everybody. So you got to specialise. Let's just do 2. We do lunch and dinner or we do breakfast and lunch. And then we said, well, hang on, how can you do breakfast and lunch? It's got to be breakfast. You got to specialise in breakfast, all day breakfast. Then we said, no, you can't do all breakfast. You've got to specialise in something. So it's croissants and sake, or it's craft beer and donuts, or whatever it was. It was so specific that Sebi scrolls, just the perfect scroll, full respect. Our new version of hospitality is, well, maybe we've just gone too uber focused on an item and we need to go back to the principles of hospitality, which might just be, probably not in the city right now, but those 3 services, because we do still have those rents and we do still have those fixed costs, and fixed costs are fixed costs. So if we've got variable and fixed and the days maybe are gone where you can specialise so tight into an item because maybe our community was saying, well, I'm happy to go there in the morning for this and there in the midday for that and there in the afternoon for that and there in the night for that. They just want one experience. We need to look a little bit broader now and say, what is new hospitality? New hospitality is probably old hospitality. It's probably not recreate the wheel, just listen to the community again and have a look at what the data is telling us about average spends and spend per person and time of day spend, and compare that against those fixed costs to create another way of creating a sustainable profit.
In hearing your answer there, Ben, it sounds like hospitality of the future isn't going to be too different to how it's been in the past. How does technology impact the delivery of that service?
It impacts it greatly because it dictates whether we like it or know it or not, our habits. The rise of Uber Inc. probably had a huge impact on the rise of small wine bars. Maybe there was a significant barrier to entry for a long time there. That barrier dropped because now we can borrow 50 grand off mum and dad and I've got a little wine bar. And my guests have an alternative to get home than either drink, drive or walk. So I think technology in every sense is, it sounds horrible, but controlling our habits. And if we are eyes open and ears open, I think we can really utilise that to our benefit. I think we do need to be aware of it and we have to probably not fight it too hard, but also not, as I said before, try and recreate the wheel. Just acknowledge that, yes, the new hospitality is going to be the old hospitality. It's just which version of it is for us right now.
Interesting hearing your comment there about wine bars, the growth in wine bars. I'll have to sit with that and reflect on it myself. So I wonder whether that is the case or what's really driven that sort of a trend. There's a quote, I don't know who gave it, but it's about humans creating technology and then that technology then creates us. And that sort of resonates in your comment there. So thank you for sharing that. I just have one last question for you today, and that's who would you like to hear on the show?
We're sitting here at ECLA, founded by Nick Maxwell, Collingwood Premiership captain. I would love to hear from him. I think he's got a great journey, having success at the highest level of AFL, which really runs this city, the second to hospitality, maybe first. And he's gone out on a limb to drive hospitality into a place where it's been dabbled, but I don't know that it's been accepted at the level he's trying to do it. I think his ability to accept and manage risk is a really interesting story. And I think his passion to create something, call it a legacy, is worth hearing from.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you joining me on the program, Ben. It's been a pleasure hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you, mate.
This program was produced by H Media. We'll see you soon.